Okay, well, we will. This is Jim Condit, Jr. Hello to everybody, and thanks for coming to the call. And Nikki Nelson is also on here as host. Nikki?
Yes, hi, everybody.
We will begin in a few minutes. Dan, the Cold Warrior, is our guest on the nuts and bolts of Precinct, and the strategy of Precinct. And I presume that Dan is going to be using the Republican Party as an example during his presentation here, because then it makes it clear that we're focusing on one exact concrete situation. And in addition, he and I, quite frankly, believe that that's where the first concentration laser attack has to be, because that's where most of the Patriot movement is more comfortable in, of the two major parties. But he may address a little of that. Wanted to mention that, again, I want to scream to the housetops and can't scream loud enough to make everyone hear that the only way to change the country is by the precinct strategy, humanly speaking. That's the only way to do it. All the other strategies, I keep hearing of energetic strategies that are great, but they're not going to do anything unless we actually become the parties and become the candidates and become the Congress and become the city councils. It's not going to happen because, barring a mass conversion of the people who are in office, who were kind of screened to be people who were more pliable and maybe more opportunist than a lot of people in the Patriot movement. So anyway, that is the thing. Is this what Dan is going to be presenting tonight is the only way that we can really, humanly speaking, on a system that's already set up, quickly take back the country for the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, which again, we with the internet, we've gone over this in other weeks, the internet, Facebook, websites, conference calls like this that can fit up to 1,000 people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could easily go from the few hundred we have to tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands in a few months. Nikki, did you want to address everybody on the chat room we're trying to get everybody acclimated to during these calls?
Oh, I wasn't going to do the chat. I was just going to talk on the wall.
Okay, well, we'll tell everybody about how we're trying to let people talk back, on the chat board. Tell them how to do that.
Oh, okay. If they go to networkamerica.org/network, it's just, if you click home, you should land on the home page anyways. You can just talk on the main wall, but there's also a chat that floats at the bottom of the network, and I haven't even set up a chat room because...
Well, no, let's just use the wall then. If it is, okay. I meant the wall. I used the wrong term, I guess.
Oh, okay. And anyways, I wanted to know if anybody that's on the call now, sorry, I'm putting out a last-minute post for everybody that the call started. If anybody is interested in becoming a state or county leader, we would like to hear from you. So maybe the last 10 minutes of the call, if we could, because maybe some people are new and this is their first call, if they're interested, it would just entail, welcoming members that are coming into your county or state, and also looking for the information. Dan has compiled a lot of information, and that's listed in the national group by state, and also in each state group there's a link to the Secretary of State's office along with the election and county recorder's office. So you're really 3 clicks away from a lot of information and, of course, all the phone numbers. And then if you're a state or a county leader, you just gather that information or those documents and upload those to your group. And when people come in, you welcome them. And, hopefully everybody's going to start meeting at the county level and the precinct level in their own town. So, you would exchange phone numbers and emails if you're comfortable doing that as well. So it's really not a lot of work. You're just welcoming people, and if they have questions, you can answer them. And if you don't know the answer, you can ask one of us, and, we'll help out. So at the end of the call, maybe the last 10 minutes, we'll find out if anybody's interested in volunteering for that, and then I can make them administrators in those groups, and then they can do whatever they want in their groups and welcome people and that type of thing.
Just go in and sign in your Network America account. Then the screen that pops up is where you should be able to say something and other people say something if you wish. Okay.
Okay.
So
all
it was Jean Hill.
There, and I see it. I'm saying hello.
Okay, Jean Hill of Mississippi recommended that we do this, and it sounds like it could be a good idea. So, okay. Well, Dan, the Cold Warrior, you're there, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you. We're recording because I know you're going to have a lot of good things to say. And why don't you just go ahead and start wherever you want and emphasize whatever you want, even if you're saying opinions of how you think we should proceed that everyone may not agree with. I think we want to hear your perspective on how you think it's best for the truly speaking, the pro-Constitution and pro-Bill of Rights patriots, how best to make your influence felt and really, reclaim the country for the true freedoms that our founding fathers envisioned. So, Cold Warrior, go ahead.
All right, thanks. My name is Dan, and I'm a precinct committeeman in Arizona, and I have been since 2007 as an appointed PC, and then I ran in 2008 and have run every 2 years since. And I've also served on the county committee of Maricopa County, the county in which 65% of all Republicans, anyways, reside. And I want to use a current day example of why we've got to do this and not hope for some silver bullet solution to come along like convention of states or citizen grand jury. We got to focus on the words, we the people. The founders put those words in the preamble of the Constitution on purpose. They wrote them in very large script. We're the guardians of our government, and we're the guardians of the Constitution. We, the people, have to enforce it, and we're doing a horrible job of it. Some of you may have heard of the 4 boxes. There's the soap box, that's the First Amendment. There's the jury box, that's when you're on a jury, especially a criminal jury, where one single jury member can hang a jury and prevent a conviction. Then, so we're really good at the First Amendment soapbox. Everybody's got a blog, and everybody yells at the congressman. And I don't think we're very good in the jury box. Some of us know how to act if we ever serve on a criminal jury. I certainly do, and I've written a pamphlet about how to do it. We're not very good at the ballot box. Our voting, and inside the 2 major parties, only about 50% of the slots that elect the officers of the party are filled. It's pathetic. And if we don't get better at the ballot box, it's going to lead to having to use the cartridge box, which we should avoid at all costs. And that's going to be coming unless we wake up and realize we've got to learn how to use the ballot box better. And the example from the current day politics is, look what's happening right now with these trade agreements. Both Democrats and Republicans are passing a bill that nobody's read again. And why are they going to do this? Because they don't really care whether you send them a fax or call them and yell at them. They don't care about any of that. All they care about is whether or not you can take them out in the next primary or general election. And we pretty much demonstrate that we can't do it. We're horrible at it. And so John Boehner doesn't care if you yell and scream at him. Now, there was one exception to that. Eric Cantor got woken up by hang on just a second. My son just came in my room, and he's autistic, and I have to deal with him for a second. Okay, Adam, you got to go out, please. Go on. No, go on. Go. Thank you. So, anyways, we have to learn. We have to learn how to win elections, and this strategy that I'm going to give you tonight is the starting point for being able to change the outcome of the elections. Because by doing this, first, you gain control of the political party you want to be a member of. In my case, it's the Republican Party. And then secondly, you'll be able to, with getting control of the party apparatus, you'll have a much better chance at the precinct level getting out the vote for your candidate of choice and beating the incumbent if it's a bad incumbent. So this is the answer to take back your political party. It's the answer for electing conservatives or any other interest group, if you can get enough people who think like you into the party. And I think this is the most important thing you're ever going to learn. about saving your country, because all it is basic American civics. So before I continue, I have a blog. It's called theprecinctproject.wordpress.com. theprecinctproject.wordpress.com. As far as I know, it is the most comprehensive compilation of information about how to become a precinct committeeman in all the various different states, because the rules vary from state to state. And whatever I can find for the Republican Party, in some cases I post Democrat Party stuff too, because it's useful as well if I can't find anything for the Republican Party. Well, what all it boils down to is this. You've got to call your party chairman, find out where your local committee works. In New York City, it's going to be a totally different structure than in Wyoming, for example. Here in Maricopa County, it's totally different than the neighboring, very rural county of Pinal County. But there's a committee, and it's made up of precinct committeemen. It's a party committee, and it's made up of precinct committeemen, and the precinct committeemen elect the committee officers, and the county officers, and the state officers, including the RNC delegates. They're called National Committee Men and National Committee Women. I voted for all of those as a precinct committeeman and then a state committeeman. The way it works in Arizona, to be able to elect the state chairman, you have to become a state committeeman. Only 1 in 3 precinct committeemen can be a state committeeman. So at the organizational meeting, usually held in December of the even-numbered years, you go to that meeting and you say, okay, I've been elected in the primary as a precinct committeeman. I want to run for one of those state committeeman positions too. Not everybody wants to do that, and I've been lucky enough to have been elected 3 times. So bottom line here, precinct committeemen, they're the card-carrying members, quote-unquote, of a political party. They get to elect the party leaders, and they're in the best position to get out the vote, because once you become a precinct committeeman, now you'll get access to whatever get-out-the-vote software the party has. And you can get access to that, and then you can design your own get-out-the-vote effort. And in my precinct, having done that in a local mayoral race, we doubled turnout in our precinct as compared to every other precinct. We tried to get the mayor candidate and the city council candidates to do what we were doing. They wouldn't do it because they were brand new candidates, and they got snookered by these political consultants who told them to spend all their money on stuff that doesn't work, like TV ads and radio ads and stuff like that, which marginally help get out the vote. The people you want to get out to vote are the ones who don't normally vote. They're not swayed by that stuff. I call them lower information, lower propensity voters, and the reason they're lower information, lower propensity voters is they're not interested in politics like those of us on this call are. Those are the people you need to target. I'm hearing something in the background, so I don't know what that is. I'll try to ignore it. So, if you want to... Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Now, hold 1 second, please. Hold one. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't have everybody muted. So, Dan, Dan, can you still talk so we can make sure we can hear you?
Yes. Okay. And I'm
sorry. I did not have everyone muted in Q&A session, so that could have been anyone's phone.
Okay.
Also, I put on the Network America page your website, which is the precinctproject.wordpress.com. So if anybody didn't catch it, they can go to the Network America homepage, and it's right up at the top now. So go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
I put a comment on the wall too with the link.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. So here's the bottom line. Me being a conservative and knowing that nationwide in the Republican Party there's about 400,000 of these slots and about 200,000 are vacant. If I could get 200,000 conservatives to become precinct committeemen, we would take over the Republican Party, because about 50% of, there's a split in the Republican Party right now in the precinct committeeman ranks. And how do I know that? It's who gets elected to the it's always some wishy-washy fake conservative that gets elected to the RNC chairmanship. Now it's Reince Priebus. He got reelected. Saul Anousis ran against him. There weren't enough conservatives to elect Saul Anousis, so it was Reince Priebus. Before that, it was Michael Steele. And that can be changed overnight. If conservatives would, instead of blogging incessantly and preaching to the internet choir, the conservative internet choir about issues and issues and issues, if they would instead actually get involved in the political process inside the Republican Party, we could take over the Republican Party. Very easy.
Dan, sorry to do this. Let me just tell everybody, I think in most computers you have to refresh or reload the page every few minutes with your own hand to see everybody's comments. Anyway, just reload your page every once in a while. I think you'll see if Dan's posting anything or anybody else is. Okay, Dan, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Jim. Before we run off and do a bunch of stuff, you got to sit down and ask yourself, what's our goal? And if our goal is to take back our government, what does that really mean? In my view, to take back our government, we have to elect constitutional conservatives. And so you got to work backwards from there to achieve that goal, step by step. What do you have to do? So to elect a constitutional conservative to any elective office, he's got to be on the general election ballot in the end. Well, to get on the general election ballot, he first has to win the primary election. And to win the primary election, you have to get the most votes in the primary election. And I've met candidate after candidate who they don't focus on getting out the votes. They don't focus on how to do that. They just can't seem to focus on that. But that's what you got to do. You got to make sure that you get enough people so that you get 50% plus one, unless it's where you just need a plurality, which is the case in some races. So the best way to get out that vote is to become a precinct committeeman. And if you have, let's say, a majority, and this happened in Maricopa County. This is a real-world example. We had 3 candidates running for our county attorney position. One was a notorious rhino who had been the county attorney. What had happened was the sitting county attorney was going to run for attorney general, and if you're going to run for another office in Arizona, you have to resign from your current one. So he resigned. So we're going to have, and it was right before the primary, so we weren't going to have a special election, or just have a regular primary. The best conservative who was running was a guy named Bill Montgomery, but nobody knew who he was. Everybody knew who Rick Romley was. So what did we do at the county committee level? Our bylaws said if 60% of the executive committee members of the Maricopa County Party endorse somebody, if it's 60%, then they can do that in a primary election. Well, we got the bare 60%. So then Bill Montgomery, from that instant forward, anytime he talked to any group that was interested in maybe hearing his message, at the very beginning he was able to say, and by the way, the Maricopa County Republican Committee that represents the grassroots people in the county party apparatus, they endorse me, not my adversary, Rick Romley. He won that primary in like a landslide. He got like 65% of the vote. And the powers that be in the local press, they didn't think he has snowball's chance in hell. But because you can then, if you get a majority on a committee, if the bylaws allow for endorsements, then you can endorse your candidate. Again, it assumes that you get enough people. The silver lining in all of this is what I said before. On average, in every state, on average, on every county committee in the country, on average in every precinct, half of these slots are vacant in the Republican Party. And we keep hearing about how we've got this center-right country, but it doesn't seem to reflect itself in the polls. And the reason it doesn't is because conservatives have been on the sidelines of actual party politics. And until conservatives, again, or any other interest group, organize and unite politically inside of a political party, and I think the first step is the Republican Party, we're going to continue to not do well at the polls. So, again, over half of these slots are vacant. So, nope, the people on this call, if you're not a precinct committeeman already, I've heard every excuse in the world for why I just can't do it. There are no excuses for not doing this. This is easy. It's basic American civics, and I believe it's when your country is in crisis, you have a civic duty to do something about it. So this office has been called the most powerful political office in the world. And Phyllis Schlafly of the Eagle Forum, if you Google, and it's linked on my blog as well, she has a little pamphlet, and it's called the most powerful political office in the world, and it's precinct committeeman. And it's for all the reasons I've already given you. And, this strategy, this precinct committeeman strategy, this was done by Barack Obama and his supporters in the Democratic Party to beat Hillary Clinton back in 2008. So basically, this isn't for you if you can't do this. If you're not willing to go to one monthly party committee meeting a month, then you might as well hang up now. It isn't for you if you won't take 2 or 3 hours or maybe 4 hours of time leading up to the primary election and leading up then to the general election. So that's about 8 hours of time, doing mundane stuff like making a few phone calls to voters and then talking to them and then telling them you're going to drop a sample ballot off at their house between now and the election day so that they'll know who to vote for. Because most people don't know who to vote for. Even people who call themselves conservatives, a lot of them, they don't know who to vote for. And here in where I live in Arizona, the city races are nonpartisan. You can't put an R after your name or a D after your name on the ballot. So they get the ballot in the mail, and they look at it and they go, I don't know who these people are. And they drive through the intersections and they see all the signs, and they don't know who those people are. Well, the job of the precinct committeeman is to inform the Republican voters, if you're a Republican precinct committeeman in those kinds of races, who the Republicans are. And it's not hard to do. Like I said, it took us, in my precinct, we had 8 slots at that time, and all 8 were filled. We divided up our precinct. We made some phone calls. We dropped off some sample ballots. And guess what? We doubled turnout. And if only those candidates had done what we asked them to do, they would have won instead of eventually losing in the general election. So, and I've heard people say, well, I just can't knock on a stranger's door. You don't even have to knock on anybody's door. We don't do it that way. What we do is we make phone calls, and then we tell them we're going to drop off the sample ballot. We don't even engage them one-on-one because it takes too much time. But if you're afraid to talk to people, you got to get over that. And when I grew up, back in the 60s and the 70s in this little town in Wisconsin, everybody in my hometown knew who the precinct committeemen were. Everyone. Hang on a second. It's my son again. All right, he left. Sorry about that. He's a wonderful kid, but I can't have him in here while I'm talking because he'll distract me. Anyways, like I said, everybody knew who these people were. My dad was a precinct committeeman. I was fortunate. I had an actual civics class in junior high in the public school system in Wisconsin, a whole year, where we learned how the political parties worked. We learned how government worked. We studied the Constitution, the Declaration. And I know they're not teaching it anymore, but this is not rocket science. This is not difficult. And with the Internet now, all you got to do is Google how to become a precinct committeeman, Cold Warrior, and you're going to find anything and everything out there about how to do it. Or go to my blog. So we've got to do this. So we've got to unite where it matters. We're fighting a political war, and those political wars have to be fought with political parties. And to become politically relevant, we've got to get inside of a political party and unite and organize there. Now, the political parties don't want you to know any of this. I mean, okay, some of you probably get Republican mailers. Maybe some of you get Democrat mailers. And what do they ask for? They ask for, they want to know what you think on the issues, but they really don't. They want to know whether you'll volunteer your time. What they really want is your money. But have you ever received a letter from either of those two parties saying, you know what we really could use? In your precinct, there's 50% of these slots are vacant, and in your county, 50% of these slots overall are vacant. We would really like you to become a ball player in the real ball game of politics, where you'll be able to elect the leaders of the party, the officers of the party. Ever get a letter like that? Well, you're never going to get a letter like that because they don't want you in the party. What I'm telling you, this is their worst nightmare, that you're going to figure this out, take over the party, and throw them all out. The people who are the backbone of the party are the precinct committeemen. Harry Truman has a quote about being precinct committeeman, and he said, the most important job I ever had in my life, political job, it wasn't the presidency, it was being a precinct committeeman in Missouri. So if you want to have an immediate effect on those incumbents that are now passing another bill that they haven't read, here's the way to do it. Don't go to the local park. Don't go to their office and have a rally. The place to have the rally is at that month's local committee where you live. Get every conservative you know, pack that committee room, wherever it is. A lot of them meet in church basements. My local district meets at a nearby hotel. You know, they meet all different sorts of places. Get as many conservatives as you can to pack that meeting. Take video of a standing room only crowd inside that room. Send that to your local your incumbent congressman. He'll get the message. Imagine if every local committee in a congressional district flooded his office with a link to a YouTube video of standing room only crowds, people wanting to become precinct committeemen to learn how to throw him out in the next election. Things would change. That's how to do it. They really don't care if you yell at them at a town hall meeting. When they see Danny Beth Martin outside the Capitol saying, Congress, can you hear us now? They really could care less. Because unless and until Tea Party Patriots and all those other groups start telling you what I'm telling you, and then you actually do it, they're not going to be impacted at all. In fact, when they see that happening, the rallies in the parks and whatnot, they kind of like wipe the sweat off their brow and go, whew, great. They haven't figured out politics yet. They're still rallying in the park. Terrific. Terrific for me. So this is what we've got to do. And, I mean, think of it. I've got some charts that I've got I've got a video presentation at my website, and I'm going to give you some other links where you can get more information. But imagine if all of these groups, and this is just a tiny fraction of the conservative groups out there. What if all the Tea Party groups, the national Tea Party groups, told their members to do what I'm telling you, and the As a Mom group, that's some conservative women, and the 912ers, and the Smart Girl Politics gals, and the NRA and GOA people, and the Sarah people, and Patriot Action Network, which I think it's still called that, and all the evangelical Christians would unite locally where they live in their local party committees. We could really remake the Republican Party, and in fact, we could remake the Democrat Party too. Because again, it only takes a few 100,000 people all across the country to do this. So why won't they tell you this? The incumbents, they're all afraid that you're going to do this, and it scares the hell out of them. And the challengers to the incumbents, if they're conservative, they don't like to let this cat out of the bag either, and here's why. They're always afraid that, well, if I tell these people in my audience who are conservative to become precinct committeemen to help get out the vote, they might do it for that other conservative candidate. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And that's why they won't tell you. I mean, Ted Cruz won't talk about this. Marco Rubio won't talk about this. In fact, if you can find me video of any of these people ever talking about this, please send it to me, because I'd love to publicize it. But I can't find any video like that. So again, it only takes a few hours a month to do this. And so the big question is, now that I've explained it all to you, will you get out of the bleachers and get into a real ball game of politics, and actually become a ball player? So here's some questions that you need to ask of yourself, because these are the kinds of things that you'll end up doing if you're a precinct committeeman. Have you ever been to a party committee meeting? Do you know the name and the number of your precinct? Do you know the geographic boundaries of I call it your political neighborhood. That's what I refer to your precinct as, a political neighborhood. Do you know any other conservatives in your precinct? Do you know even if your party's precinct committeeman even exists? Is there one? All the slots might be vacant. Do you know where your local party committee meets and your county committee? Do you know where they meet? If you don't know the answers to those kind of questions, you're not a political activist, in my opinion. And a friend of mine has a saying, you really can't call yourself a political activist unless in the last election cycle you had a clipboard in your hand and you were getting signatures for either a candidate to get on the ballot or a voter initiative. It's the people with the clipboards. Those are the real activists. So in Arizona, I'll just give you how it works in Arizona quickly, just as an example. We elect our PCs, so you have to get on the primary ballot, and that's real simple to do. The party will give you the forms. You don't have to get any more than 10 signatures, and it's based on how many registered Republicans are in the precinct, and it varies greatly. But you never have to get more than 10 signatures. So who do you get the 10 signatures from? Well, you get a walking sheet from the party for your precinct. It'll show you the houses that Republicans live in. And what I do is I go to you can see on there if in the last 4 elections how many times they voted. So if they're a 4/4, that means they voted in all the primaries and all the general elections. You go knock on those people's door, they're happy to sign your nominating paper. And they've probably never seen a precinct committeeman before. Well, in my precinct, it's not that way anymore because we've got all our slots filled, and we go see these people every year to get signatures. And then you have to file, so you have to get 10 signatures, and it doesn't even have to be Republicans in Arizona. An independent can sign your form. And then you have to sign what's called an affidavit of qualification that says, I hereby certify that I'm a registered Republican and I reside at this location in this precinct, and then that has to be notarized, or signed by 2 witnesses, and that's it. Turn those into the Board of Elections before the deadline, and you'll be on the August primary ballot. So any qualified voter can become a precinct committeeman. Most right now are running unopposed, so you'll probably get elected if you run. And then they make it even easier in Arizona. If you miss this first deadline and you fail to get your signatures, you can file a 1-page affidavit of write-in candidacy. That has to be notarized, and you've got like 10 days to do that. If you get that in on time, then you won't be on the ballot, but here's the way it works in Maricopa County. If there's an equal number or fewer number of candidates that is equal to the number of the quota, because some precincts have 8, some have 3. Again, it's based on the number of registered voters. if there, let's say in my precinct, well, this happened in my precinct last time. We have 12 slots. Our precinct got bigger. They combined some precincts. So now we have 12 slots. We had 12 candidates run. As a result, we all won by default. There was no election. They canceled the election then, and then they just deem you all elected. And the reason they do that is to save money, because otherwise they'd have to print up for each precinct a separate ballot for the precinct committeeman races, because only Republicans can vote for the Republican precinct committeeman candidates. So that's why they don't do it. So, again, folks, there's no cavalry coming to save us. We, the people, have to unite and kick out all those who won't abide by the Constitution. So what's the first step? You got to take over a political party. You do that by becoming precinct committeeman in the party. The parties, both of them are there for the taking. It's a pure numbers game. Politics is a game of numbers. If you show up in sufficient numbers, then you win. And we have the numbers. We had over, remember back in September 12, 2009, they say there was 1 million people in the Capitol on that 9/12 in 2009. If only 20% of them had gone back home and done what I'm telling you, we would have taken over the Republican Party already. So we've got to get organized, and we've got to unite inside a political party, because that's where it matters. And you got to set priorities. What I do is I have limited amounts of time. So, but what I put on the top of my priority list every month is attending 2 meetings. My legislative district committee meeting, and then my Maricopa County committee meeting. And I'm not even a member of that county anymore, but I was asked to volunteer to rewrite the bylaws and form a committee to do that. So I go to those meetings now too. That's where I put my priorities, those meetings. Why? Because I meet with other conservatives there, and we have the meeting either before or after the meeting where we strategize together and try to come up with recruitment strategies for getting additional conservatives into our county committee and into our legislative district committee. And then the other thing I commit to is about 4 hours of get out the vote activity. Very efficient, disciplined, targeted, get out the vote activity and it works. In 2014, my precinct, we got over 65% of Republicans to the polls in the general election, and it really made a difference. We won all 3 races and we weren't supposed to, but we did for the state legislature. And the reason we did it is because we had a really good get out the vote effort. Now I'm going to give you some links here. I've already given you the precinctproject.wordpress.com. I also post articles at unifiedpatriots.com. And there's a button there when you get there to unifiedpatriots.com that says activism. If you click on that, there's articles about the precinct committeeman strategy. I also post articles occasionally at redstate.com. And if you go to redstate.com/diary/Cold Warrior, you'll see all of my articles. There's another website I'd like to mention, and that is thevoicesofamerica.org. Thevoicesofamerica.org. There's a guy named Peter Wolf and another guy whose name I can't recall right now, but they've got some really good materials there as well. And then Richard Viguerie wrote a book recently called Takeover, the 100-Year War for the Soul of the GOP and how conservatives can finally win it. And it's a history of the war going on in the Republican Party for the last 100 years between conservatives and progressives, essentially. And in the last 2 chapters, he lays out the precinct committeeman strategy and says everybody should get this guy's book on Amazon called, what did I call it? Taking Back Your Government, the neighborhood precinct committeeman strategy. I did it as a test to see what kind of market was out there for a book like that. It's basically my blog articles, sort of revamped. I posted that there 2 or 3 years ago to see, okay, if I put a 99-cent book about basic American civics on Amazon, what will happen? Answer? Not much. Because it doesn't seem like Americans are very interested in this subject, unfortunately. You people on the call are the exception, I think. And then the other thing that I recommend everybody do is this. Get a citizen's rule book. It's published by Witten Printers out of Arizona. If you look up Witten Printers, hang on a second, my son just came back in again. Adam, you got to go out. I'm on the phone. Come on, go. Right now, go. So anyways, Witten Printers, you can Google it. They sell for $1 a piece. They don't make any money on it. It's a labor of love. There's a whole story behind it. But it's got the Declaration, it's got the Constitution, and then a lot of founders' quotes and some good information about how to conduct yourself as a fully informed juror as well. Here's what I recommend you do. Commit for the next month to do the following if you're not doing this already. 10 minutes, first 10 minutes, read the Declaration of Independence. You might not get through it the first time in 10 minutes, but over time, it'll probably take you about just 10 minutes to read the Declaration of Independence. Then spend 10 minutes reading the Constitution. And then the last 10 minutes, and some days it might take you 20 minutes, get a copy of the Federalist Papers and start at the beginning and read one of the 85 essays per day. Do that for a couple of months, and you'll have read the entire Federalist Papers, and you'll almost have committed to memory the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So I recommend everybody do that. We have to know what we're fighting for, right? And the way to do that is to become very, very familiar with the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So that's the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Okay. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, we always welcome both. You hit *6, and then once you get in *6, it'll say, if you want to get in the queue to ask questions, hit a 1. So *6 kind of gets you into the place where you can hit the 1, but you got to do both. Dan, you gave the rules for Arizona basically, but I just wanted to reemphasize what you already said, that in every state it's simple. So like in Ohio, it's just 5 signatures per party, per precinct. If I'm going to run for the Republican Party precinct captain in my precinct, which happens to be Triple E, it's called Green Township Triple E because we're not in the proper city. We're in a suburb of Cincinnati, so it's Green Township Triple E. Now that changes every few years when they I don't know if they're gerrymandering or the population's changing, but your precinct may change every once in a while, but it'll stay the same for many years. And I got to get, if I want to run for Republican or Democrat, but let's take Republican, I got to get, in our case, we have to get our walking sheet, which has all the registered voters, house by house. It's, if you walk down the side of the street, it'll say this person voted, they voted independent, meaning they didn't ask for a primary ballot, or they voted Democrat or Republican, or if there's anybody else qualified, if their Libertarians were qualified and they voted in the Libertarian primary. But it goes down each street, one side of the street at a time. So if you were walking, you would literally know, unless they moved recently, I'm going to Johnny Jones's house and he voted in the Republican primary. So if you need 5 signatures in Ohio, I would have to get people from that walking list, either Republicans or Independents. So if I got, let's say somebody gets themselves and their wife both voted Republican, their next door neighbor, the Johnny guy I just mentioned, he voted Republican, and I got 3, and then you see the couple next door to that, they were independents. They didn't vote in the primary, so you can get both of their signatures, and now you got your 5 signatures to qualify to run for precinct, okay? So there's rules like that in every town. It's always better to get more than the minimum, though. It's better to get like 10 in case for some reason there was some mistake somewhere. But that's all there is to it, and then you're on the ballot. And when you go to vote at the primary, which in Ohio is in May, I think Dan said it's August in Arizona, but it's in wherever your primary is in the even years. You're going to see your name at the end of the ballot after the person running for governor and auditor, a county auditor, and county commissioner, and it's an inter-Republican contest in this example. What the primary is, you're going to see your name at the end. And if nobody else is running, you hit your name and you win. If somebody's running against you, then it's whoever gets the most votes. And that's why sometimes people stand at the polls for 12 hours on Election Day. And if it's a caucus state like Kentucky, you find out when the caucus is, you go. And I think Gene Hill of Mississippi told us he went to his county caucus for his whole, I think for his whole county, and only 3 people showed up, him, his wife, and somebody they knew, and they elected him as county chairman. Because I guess that's basically a Democratic thing, but Gene's a county chairman now. So some places it's caucuses, and you actually watch everybody vote. That's how the Iowa caucus is held. That's why you're able to see what happens in real life in real time if you're there to observe. So anyway, Dan, thank you for all that information. Now, if anyone, let me see. I'm sorry, I minimized my screen here for a second, which is not good. Okay, so one person is in the queue. So let's take a question from the last 4 digits of the number, 7255. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Hi. I'm wondering, what was that link, the Red States, your diary, redstates.com.
By the way, if everybody could identify yourself by first name and state or something, because we don't know everybody's voices. So
Kristen Barker in Kansas.
Okay, you went all the way and identified your whole name. And Tristan is one of our county leaders in Network America. So go ahead, Dan. He asked you for the Red State link again.
Right. It's redstate.com, and then I guess that's called a / that's leaning to the right. And then you type in diary, DIARY. And then another / and then my name, Cold Warrior.
Oh, okay. I found it.
They call articles at Red State diary entries for some reason. So it's redstate.com /diary / Cold Warrior. Or you can do this. If you just put redstate.com Precinct Committeeman Strategy Cold Warrior, you're going to find one of my articles. And then once you've clicked on that article and you're at Red State, then you can click on my name and it'll take you to all of my articles. And most of them are still there. When Red State transitioned from one platform to another, they lost some content. So they're not all there, but many of them are still there.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm just saying because I want to read through this. I want to read through all this.
Yeah, and maybe on another next week's call, if anybody's got any insights or observations, then bring them on, because we are. I don't care the fact that we only have somewhere between 100 and 200 people right now. It doesn't matter to me if everyone's catching on. We need to kind of light this fire until it catches on. It is not. I don't think it's possible that the American people, the activists especially, and I'm saying there's 10 to 20 million people who want to do something, and I'm basing that on Tea Party, Campaign for Liberty, NRA. Ron Paul got 7 million votes. He's somewhat of a gauge of at least there's people who at least, whether you agree with him, Ron Paul or not, that he's trying to talk up the Constitution. So and you could perhaps cite a few other candidates that show that it seems to be 10 to 20 million people who at least want to do something. They can't be so dumb once they hear this message that they think that that something else is going to work in the natural order. By hearing this message, to me, it should shine a light on the other messages that they're just not complete. And that's why I kind of like the term missing ingredient. This is the missing ingredient for everybody that believes in something, that they can get themselves heard, And so now if anyone wants to, ask a question, you hit *6 or make a comment. you hit *6, and then when you get in there, it's like press 1 to get in the queue.
Well,
right
let me
now,
ask
there's
another question. I want to
yeah.
know,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tristan. Yeah.
So where do the rules for politics come from? Do they come from the Constitution or from the parties that you sign up for?
Well, what difference does it make?
Well, if there's a rule in it,
look, here's the bottom line. If you don't want to be a precinct committeeman in Kansas, then don't become one.
No, I'm gonna. I just like.
Well, I mean,
my idea, I'd like to leave a paper trail so the public would know exactly how it works.
Yeah, here's what I would say the answer to that is that they do not come from the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. That set up the general principles for the country. But what happened is that as each county, you had the 13 original states, right? And then they were divided into counties, and I'm not really sure whether that happened at the beginning of the 13 states or whether it evolved. But then somebody must have got the bright idea, what are we going to do to have elections? Now, you can read about the history of elections, and I think at one time everyone brought their own ballot. By that I mean there wasn't a ballot when you got there that was made by the Board of Elections. The Whigs handed out their ballot, the Democrats handed their ballot, and sometime in that, I guess and this is somewhat of a guess, but it evolved that there was a county board of elections, and then they said, well, let's divide all the counties into precincts, and that's what Abraham Lincoln talked about, precincts, in 1860, telling this is way before there was television or telephone, but he put out, I guess, in letters, everybody work your neighborhood precinct and try to get out the vote. But I think it developed in the next 30 years after the Constitution, where and probably one county got the idea first, and so forth. So it would be kind of interesting to know the exact answer to that. But I think it kind of organically evolved, just as a matter of practical organization.
Well, and so eventually we could probably organically involve it in our favor.
Yeah, and it is. But Dan addressed that, though. It is in our favor now. We're just not working it. So, in other words, let Dan address that for a minute. How these are tools, but nobody's using them.
Look, I will. Have you ever heard of Get Out of Our House? GOOH.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and how's it working out for GOOOH? If that's enough O's. Not very well, and here's why. Again, there's a lot of groups out there, and somebody gets an idea goes off over his head, and he goes, "I've got a brilliant idea. I'm going to form an organization called Get Out of Our House, and here's the way it's going to work. We're going to get first what we got to do is we got to get like 1 million people to do this." So then I start scratching my head, and I go, wait a second. We haven't been able to get even 200,000 people to use the existing political apparatus of the Republican Party. Conservative people who want, to libertarians, conservatives, they all kind of gravitate to the Republican Party. And we haven't even been able to get 200,000 people to take over the Republican Party, which already has meeting rooms, already has a structure, already has bylaws, already has money in its coffers at the local level, the county level, the state level. So instead of running off and trying to start a new party, if you're a conservative / libertarian, why not instead invade and transform by sheer numbers the Republican Party apparatus and take it over completely? That's my argument. That's my argument to the Get Out of Our House people. I've debated them about this, and in fact, the guy who was the Arizona chair of Get Out of Our House came to me and called me one day and said, "Hey Dan, I know you. I've seen you talk at Tea Party rallies and whatnot, and I'm the chairman of the Arizona Get Out of Our House thing." So I said, "Well, can I get like 10 minutes of your time to let me try to convince you that what you're doing is a really bad idea and that I have a better one?" And he listened. He's a really nice guy. And now he's the chairman of one of the legislative district committees in here in Arizona. And that means that he gets to go. He's on the Arizona GOP Executive Committee. And we're working together. We've been working together for the last 2 or 3 years with others to help elect conservatives here in Arizona. And what was interesting was, after I explained it to him, just like I've explained right now, that it's a better strategy to take over an existing organization than to start one from scratch. And this guy's a bright guy. He's a retired financial analyst. He knows numbers. He knows finance stuff. And he goes, yeah, you're right. What I'm doing is really doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm with you now. And so he's gotten involved in our party here. He's a member of the Arizona Republican Assembly like I am, which is we're trying to create as a conservative caucus within the Republican Party at the legislative district committee level. We have 30 legislative districts in Arizona, and at the county level we have 15 counties. And what we want to be able to get to do eventually is make sure that when the internal party officer elections take place, which is it varies committee by committee. The county committees vary by their bylaws. The state committee varies as well. Some of the officers are elected in a January even year mass meeting, and then some of them are elected in the odd years as well. It's staggered. But the bottom line is, in each case, if there's a conservative candidate for any of the officer slots, including the chairman slot, the only way they're going to get elected is if there's a majority of conservatives who will cast votes for them. And that's the goal here. The first step is to take over the Republican Party. So we've got a conservative, hardcore message like Ronald Reagan. And this is what Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan and his supporters got into the grassroots of the Republican Party. So by the time in 1980, when they got to the convention, he was able to get the delegates he needed to overcome all of his adversaries. It's all about numbers. And I've been working, for example, with the Ben Carson supporters here in Arizona. They came to me and said, hey, somebody told us that you kind of know how this all works. Could you give us some advice? So I asked them, I said, what's your goal? And they said, our goal is to get Ben Carson elected president. I go, okay, that's your wish. Now let's work backwards and figure out what your goal has to be. So here in Arizona, what do you have to do to get him the nomination here in Arizona? And they thought for a minute. And we have two mechanisms here in Arizona. We have a presidential preference primary that only Republicans can vote in. And then we have a Arizona presidential nominating convention. So I told him, I said, the more important of the two is the nominating convention. Who elects the delegates for the candidates that go to the nominating convention? Do you know who that is? They didn't know. And a couple of them had become appointed precinct committeemen. The precinct committeemen in every legislative district have a special caucus meeting. And anybody can come to the caucus meeting and say, I'm a Republican, I've registered as a Republican, I want to be a delegate to the presidential nominating convention. And they can run. But in Arizona, unlike a lot of other states, but here in Arizona, the only voters for who gets to be a delegate are the precinct committeemen, those who were elected in the primary or who got appointed before December 30th, on or before December 31st of the preceding year. So I told them, if you guys want to get the maximum number of delegates for Ben Carson, you got to go out and get as many of your supporters to become precinct committeemen through the appointment process as possible between now and the end of 2015. And that's what they're working on. I'm not necessarily a Ben Carson supporter, but having met the Ben Carson supporters, they're all good, decent people who fundamentally want to destroy Obamacare and get rid of it. That's why they're supporting Ben Carson. That's a fundamental reason why they're supporting Ben Carson. I'm all for that, so I support them. They're conservatives. They may not be the people who I would, like I said, I'm not sure that I would support Ben Carson. I'm not supporting him now, but I certainly am supporting any of his supporters who want to help him to become a precinct committeeman. Because eventually they might decide, you know what, maybe Ben Carson's not the best guy after all. And they'll end up voting for a different candidate, maybe one that I like better. So that's what you have to do. You have to go get the bylaws of the Republican Party, which are on the GOP.com website on the council's page. You got to get your state bylaws. You have to get your county bylaws. And then if you have a local committee, because like in some rural areas, the committee is the county committee. Here in Maricopa County, we have all these legislative districts that geographically are in whole or in part. 20 of the 30 legislative districts in Arizona are within Maricopa County. So we have these county committees, and they have bylaws too. And you have to read all that stuff. But the nice thing about it is most of what you need to know is in a precinct committeeman handbook that almost every state party writes every year and tweaks every year, which lays out how it all works. And so I have links to some of those as well. If I can find online a precinct committeeman handbook for a particular state, I add it to my little blog that I have.
Yeah, Dan, let me ask Tristan. Tristan, you're still there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to say something, then ask Tristan a question, then maybe, Dan, you can comment. And so, for instance, I'm with you, Tristan. I'd like to know, there's a guy named, can't remember his name, but he's Ballot Access. I think his website is Ballot Access, and I can't remember his name right now. He was a friend of Howard Phillips and probably a lot of other people, because he keeps up on all kinds of things to do with ballot access and how hard is it for a party to get ballot access and the history of voting and all this kind of stuff. And I'd like maybe a call into him. We could get a shortcut to learn the history of where the precinct and the county system came from, because I always, too, like to know, to explain to people. But in any case, it's set up, okay? And it probably was just somebody looked at it and said, well, this makes sense to do it this way, and people are going to vote. They can't all go to the state capitol, so we'll have it in each neighborhood, so nobody has to travel, especially in those days of horse and buggy and foot. They didn't have to travel more than a few miles at the most to vote, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it was logical. But the one thing I want to make here is that the system as set up is not against us as it is now set up. It's sitting there. And we've explained it many times on this call, and maybe we need to explain it more. But it's sitting there, and it's just like the Iowa caucus. The Iowa caucus is set up so 1,800 little groups come together in each county, some at a library, some here, some there, some at a schoolroom, and they vote in the open. So if any campaign had 1,800 observers, they would see with their own eyes what the real result was in each precinct. In each caucus meeting. And if then they added up those 1,800 caucuses, this should be going on in every state and every election, by the way, that where there's something to watch, then you would know for sure what the count was. And if the state Democratic Party or the state Republican Party tried to alter the votes at the top because their guy didn't win, you would be able to see it. So the Iowa caucus is as it is. Now, the GOP has been caught cheating twice in the last 16 years, one in 2012, one in 1996. Now, they may claim in 2012 it was an honest mistake, but whatever. They had to change the winner in that thing. So nobody's watching. The Iowa caucus, they go and vote, and they go home. Nobody's watching. In the Democratic Party either. And the same thing goes in the precinct system. it's not against us. It's set up that if we work the system, it is not weighted against us. What is weighted against us sometimes is the party leaders in the county or the state or the national will try to cheat when they see they're not going to win. That can happen, but that's not the system itself. The system itself is perfectly fair if everybody would play fair, so we don't really need to remake that system. So do you see what I'm saying, Tristan? Because your comments seem to indicate you might think it was set up against us somehow. Do you see what I'm saying, or do you disagree?
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying. My main point is that, well, people are creatures of common sense, and, well, if they don't understand something, they don't get involved in it. So I want to... that's why I think it's a really good thing that that the Cold Warrior here kept a diary every step of the way. So, so us, we can come in and read that and see what he went through, and kind of,
And that's the idea of Network America.
Yeah. Jim, can I mention something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in a nutshell, this is what I did, and I'll try to keep this very short. I knew all about all of this as a kid because I had that civics course in my hometown. Then I had the good fortune also of having he's still alive, he's in his 90s, he's been the town clerk of a little township in Wisconsin, just inland from the Mississippi River. I grew up right along the shore of the Mississippi River in a little town, but he'd been a town clerk for 30 years of this town. Another uncle, his brother, my dad's brother, mayor of a little town in Wisconsin, 20 miles from where I live, long-term mayor. My dad was a city council, a county board chairman, et cetera, served on some state commissions and stuff like that. These guys all had high school educations. That's it, from my hometown. Anyways, then I got to also go to Badger Boys State when I was in high school. And there what they do is they basically go for a week. They teach you how government works, how the election process works, and all of that. And like I said, it all works. Well, I was in the military, then I went to law school, then I lived in California, and I was into the Second Amendment. But I never really thought I needed to get involved in party politics because I figured, Pete Wilson was the governor in California, and they don't really need me. And then I moved to Arizona. And I thought, hey, I'm in Arizona, I'm in Goldwater country, they don't need me. Then I got involved because of the border problem. And somebody at that meeting that I went to, it was Minuteman Civil Defense Corps meeting, said, you know what you really need to do? Yeah, going down to the border, that's a great thing. Do that. But there's another thing we need to do, and that's politics. And in the Republican Party, it's becoming a precinct committeeman, and half of these slots are vacant. We got to elect better people in the legislature. See me after the meeting. So I walked up to him and I said, tell me more. And he says, yeah, call the county. You live in Maricopa County. Call the county chairman. Find out where your legislative district meets and go there. And then tell him you want to become a precinct committeeman. I said, okay. So I did. I got there, and there was 160 slots at that time for that legislative district, and only 40 were filled. And I said, this is 2007. This is pre-Obama.
Just a second, Dan. Just so I understood what you said, there was 160 spots and only
Only 40 were filled. 1/4.
40 out of 160 were filled. Wow. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I said that this was the old legislative district 17, which was most of Tempe and a little bit of Scottsdale. So I said, where is everybody? And they said, well, this is the way it is in our party right now. And I thought, oh my goodness, what the hell is going on? Well, then Obama gets elected. So I realized I got to do something. I got to start recruiting people into the party. Well, but what did everybody do who was conservative? Oh, no. They heard Rick Santelli talk about a Tea Party, and all these Tea Parties sprung up. So what did I do? I didn't go run off and join a Tea Party. I was already in a party, a real party, a political party that can make a difference. So I would go to the Tea Party rallies, and the Tea Party meetings and the 9/12 meetings and every other conservative group I could find, and I'd try to recruit these people and I had a flyer and I had a sign. My sign said, "Want to really do something? Become a precinct committeeman. Ask me how." And I'd walk with this big sign above my head, and I'd hand out my little flyers. And, that's what we need to do. We need to unite politically. And what I mean by that is we need to unite where it really matters politically. And where it really matters politically is in a political party, because then you can start endorsing candidates and do all those other things I talked about tonight that changes the outcomes of the elections. Now, interestingly enough, there's one other thing I want to mention, and it's, this convention of states business that some charlatans, in my estimation, are using as a vehicle to raise money. There's not going to be a convention of states, and it's a really bad idea. And please don't donate any money to a convention of states organization, because it's going to line the pockets of the people who are asking for the money, and it's not going to accomplish anything. There's no silver bullet. Our state senator, the president of our state senate, is a man named Andy Biggs, and he wrote a book called The Con of the Con. It's The Con of the Con-Con, and it's on Amazon. It's like $12.95. It's a little book. Doesn't take very long. But what he says in this book is fundamental, and it's this. These schemes to have some silver bullet solution to fix everything are not going to work. What's going to work is the electoral process. We've got to learn how to elect better people. That's what we need to focus on. And if we focus on that, we can do great things. But the problem is, for example, evangelical Christians. 50% of them aren't even registered to vote, and of the 50% that are registered, only half of them vote. So only 25% of evangelical Christians vote. Next group, NRA members. There's about 4.5 million NRA members. Most of them are pretty hardcore on the Second Amendment, you would imagine. Only 50% of them are registered to vote, and only 25% of the registered members actually turn out and vote. If we could change those two things, if we could bump up their participation in the political process, not only to just vote, but imagine if we could get 10 or 20% of those people to become active in party politics, we could change everything. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to focus. The place to focus is where you live. Go find like-minded people, and that's what I've been trying to do. I try to go into target-rich environments. This call is a target-rich environment, in my view. The people on this call have taken an extra step to educate themselves and get involved. And hopefully now they'll take another step and get involved where they live as a precinct committeeman. That's why I try to talk to the Tea Party people. And I try to tell them, okay, look, you're 6 years into the Tea Party movement. What have you accomplished politically? And they look at you like deer in headlights, and they realize, maybe not too much. Have you voted for your county committee chairman of your political party? No, they shake their head and they don't know. Have you worked as a poll worker or a poll watcher for your precinct on election day? No, they haven't done anything like that. These are the things that we got to start doing. If we don't do them, I can't guarantee that if 200,000 conservatives descend on the Republican Party and take it over, that will save our country. But I do know this: if we don't do that, we're going to lose our country.
Another thing that needs to be said here is that why do we talk about? I mean, I've said before. I just found out today something else John Boehner did. He's the Speaker of the House. I mean, what Mitch McConnell and Boehner are doing in so many ways. I despise what they're doing. I despise the national RNC and the DNC in so many ways, in different ways. But the Democrats and Republicans control every county in this country. And I was in a group a while back, and it was the group who made up the 7 principles, the 7 freedom principles, you see. And everybody wanted to put in, well, let's say virtually every county. The Democrats and Republicans control virtually every county, because maybe there's a county somewhere they don't control of our 3,141 counties. I will be glad if anybody can show me one county that isn't controlled by either the Democrats, the Republicans, or the Democrats and Republicans. So I use this analogy, and some people are sick of hearing it. When the Founding Fathers wanted to found our country, they had to fight the British Empire, which at that time was the most powerful, invincible, they thought, and many people thought, empire in the world. And they couldn't say, gee, this looks hard. This looks hard to fight the British. Let's fight the Brazilians. Let's fight the Brazilians. Well, the only problem was that the Brazilians weren't controlling the United States territory. It was the British that were. So they had to fight the British. And that's what has to be done now. The Democrat and Republican parties control every county. So and there's other reasons why the third parties, in my opinion, are checkmated for the present time. So that is why we have to change the character of the Democrat and Republican parties as it stands. That's what we have to do. Now, is it an impossible task? No, because there's millions of people want to do something. We only need 200 to 400,000 at the most in each party, 200 to 300,000 maybe. And we have the internet. I mean, the internet alone, email, everything we've talked about, websites, is so much beyond what anybody had before 1996. The average people, the everyday people like you and me, have never had 1/100th the tools at our disposal to reach each other and to educate. So there's one reason it's not happening, and that's because instead of us having, 5 million people on this call and everybody leaving knowing what to do, we maybe have 30 people or 35 people, whatever it is right now. That's okay. We got to start somewhere. But my point is, it is really, if I was to speak on, I don't like to offend people if I don't have to, but really, our side, the everyday Americans, however vaguely they want to keep the Constitution and freedom, however inarticulate they are about it, we're really acting like morons as a people. The tools are all here. We're all free. We're not under martial law. We may be someday. We are not. I have to drive to an elderly lady many times a week, or several times a week, when she needs something when her assistant isn't in. And believe me, there's nobody stopping me from east to west, going from west to east in Cincinnati, saying, what are you doing out tonight? I'm talking 3 in the morning. Something. Nobody is stopping anybody from traveling. Nobody's stopping anybody from calling anybody. And if everybody was doing just what Dan said tonight, or a fraction of what Dan said tonight, right, then we could change this country. The problem is people are watching right now. They're watching O'Reilly on Fox maybe, or they're doing something else that is, I'm not saying that's bad to be informed. It isn't. It's good to be informed. But they're not doing the simple things in a few hours a year that they could do to change this country. And that's what we're trying to break here. I don't feel sad or mad about it, but I do say, objectively speaking,
it needs to be done.
It needs to be done, and I just do say, objectively speaking, if we look at the opportunities that are before us, the reins that we could grasp in our hands, but we don't grasp in our hands, and how we're not grasping the reins of public influence in our hands, we can look back on this period someday, and it'll be said the American people were acting like morons and squandering away their freedom and following leaders who would not tell them what to do. And that is the tragedy of what's happening in America right now. And most people feel totally defeated. They feel like, oh gosh, Obama's going to win, or Hillary's going to win, or some other candidate in the Republican. Bush is going to win. A lot of people don't like Bush, of course, because the Bush have been a long time, and they're considered to be rhinos by many people, including myself. So the point is, they feel like we're in a perpetual defeat mode. But we're only in we're like a team, a football team, And our football team has been convinced to sit in the stands and watch the game. We're all in our football uniforms. But somebody said, you sit in the stands and just root and cheer and ask the other side to score some touchdown. And their team is out on the field scoring touchdowns. And instead of us running out on the field, and would get roughed up a little bit and all that, but instead of us running out on the field, we're sitting in the stands begging our opponents on the field to do something for us. And our leaders are saying, you're doing great. Just stay in the stands. Don't go out on the field. It's kind of, you can get dirty and roughed up out there. So anyway, that's just a little of my thoughts. But no, but the system, and Dan, would you just address for a second, the system, you would agree, I'm sure, because you've said it, is not stacked against us. We're just not using the system as far as the mechanics of it go.
Hang on,
No, I agree.
Am I taking up too much time here?
I'm sorry?
Am I taking up too much time? Is there anyone else in the queue?
No one else is in the queue, Tristan. Don't worry. But let Dan address that. Of whether now, I'm not saying the people in power, from Boss Hogg on the Dukes of Hazzards to Stalin, every leader that isn't honest is going to try to cheat to keep power. Okay, so we could go into a long history. But as far as the mechanics, Dan, of this system, the precinct system, as long as everyone, we got to force everybody to play fair. But I'm saying the mechanics are not set up against us. They're set up really for us. We're just not using it. But maybe you could address that for a minute or two.
No, I agree with you 100%. I agree with everything that you said. And I'll just try to give you a couple of examples of people who are most of the people in the conservative movement / libertarian movement, they're really good people, and they want to do something. But it seems like the hardest thing for them to focus on and do, and I'll give you some examples here in just a second, is get involved in party politics. So, for example, the Oath Keepers. All probably have heard of Oath Keepers. And what do? They do some great things, like over in Nevada to help out that rancher. Fantastic. I mean, not only great, I mean, courageous. But ask Stuart Rhodes or the other high muckety-mucks when they have a speech, are you going to talk about encouraging your Oath Keeper members to become precinct committeemen in the party of their choice where they live, the political party of their choice where they live? They never talk about that. Why?
Has anybody addressed that with Stuart?
I don't know.
Just a second. Dan, don't lose your train of thought, Dan or Nikki. Let me just say, because maybe we got new people on the call, if anybody wants to comment or ask a question, in case you don't know how to do it, you hit *6, and then you'll hear a voice say, if you want to get in the queue, press 1. Hit 1, and you'll be in the queue. I've left Tristan's line open because nobody's been in the queue, which I think is indicative that people want to hear what Dan has to say. But if you want, again, *6, then hit 1 if you want to make a comment or ask a question. We'll probably wind up the official meeting in a few minutes. We usually close at 11. But I didn't want to truncate Dan's comments because we'll probably use this show as a basis to make a recorded YouTube where we'll fill in some blanks maybe around it because there's so much to say around what Dan had brought up. But I didn't want to cut him off as what he was doing here tonight. So go ahead, Dan. I hope I didn't make you. And Nikki, you were saying, did anybody address what? I didn't understand your question, Nikki.
Has anybody addressed Stuart Rhodes? I'm an Oath Keeper personally. I've been one for years, and it's not easy to get a hold of anybody in power at the Oath Keepers.
I have called in on a radio show that he was on, and I asked him that question, and what he said was, just like they all do. Oh, of course, we always talk about that. Sure. But they don't. And I don't know why they don't, but they don't.
That's the understatement of the week. They don't, and I know they don't.
I'm going to get in contact with him then. I was going to volunteer, and they wanted me. I submitted my CV to Oath Keepers back in 2012 or 11, I can't remember. And then I got onto the election fraud case that I was working on, so I ended up not going to work for them. But I'll try to get a hold of the gal that was my contact there and see if we can get them to maybe get the word out. We'll see where they stand on it.
Well, it's in the context of the 4 boxes I talked about. Oath Keepers has jumped to the 4th box, the worst box to use, the cartridge box. I don't ever want to have a shooting war. I mean, I was in the Army. I went to West Point. I was an intelligence officer. I did some secret and dangerous stuff on behalf of the United States and put people in harm's way, really bad harm's way. I don't ever want to be pulling the trigger on an AR-15, in my neighborhood. I don't ever want to go down that way. And Oath Keepers, I love them for instilling the oath, but what they need to do, I think, is spread the message that, hey, we got to do stuff politically too, so we never get to the cartridge box. And that's all I'm saying, is that's what we have to try to get every group to do. Now, there's True the Vote, Catherine Engelbrecht's group. Awesome. Definitely you want to do poll watching and poll working. But to be an official poll watcher for a political party, you got to get involved into the political process and the political party in your state. And look at Texas as an example. In the 2014 Republican Party primary, two people who are notorious rhinos were up for re-election. Senator John Cornyn and Representative Pete Sessions, who was running the National Republican Congressional Committee PAC at that time. Out of all the people in Texas who were registered voters, only 9-point-something% thought it was a good idea to spend their time voting, and it's an open primary system in Texas. So a Democrat, an independent, they can go to their polling place and say, I want a Republican ballot today. Only less than 10% of all registered all registered voters in Texas bothered to vote in the primary. Where was Tea Party Patriots in getting out the vote? Where was True the Vote in getting out the vote? Where was Tea Party Express in getting out the vote? Where was Glenn Beck in getting out the vote? Where was Freedom Works in getting out the vote in Texas to defeat John Cornyn and Pete Sessions? They were nowhere to be found. Why? Because they don't focus on this mundane stuff that I focus on, because, frankly, there's no money in it.
Huh.
Now, one other thing I want to say about Glenn Beck. I've never talked to Glenn Beck personally, but I have done Twitter stuff back and forth with him. Remember his grand announcement that he was leaving the Republican Party? Oh my God, Glenn Beck is leaving the Republican Party. Let's do a reality check there. Glenn Beck was never in the party. The only people who are in a political party, in quote-unquote card-carrying members, have voting status in a political party in this country, are those who have achieved that status. And in most states, that means you became a precinct committeeman. Glenn Beck's never been a precinct committeeman, either in New York or after he moved to Texas in the Republican Party. What did he? In fact, here in Arizona, you can register for a party or be an independent. In Texas, you can't register. Like I said, they have an open primary system. But people see it's in their mind. I'm a Republican, but I'm not one anymore, or something. But Glenn Beck never became they call it precinct delegate in Texas. And they have a caucus system. And the way it works in Texas is on primary election day, when the polls close in every precinct, wherever that precinct voting place is, if you're a Republican and you want to become the precinct delegate, you show up after 7 o'clock for and it's the same thing with the Democrats. They show up and they go into whatever room they're in, they go off into a corner, and they say, I'd like to be the delegate, or I'd like to be the delegate. And then they have a vote. And whoever wins is the delegate to the county committee. Glenn Beck's never done anything like that.
Dan,
yes.
If I could say, we do have one other person in the queue, then we'll probably, what we usually do for anybody that's new, we usually go from 10 to 11, then we open the call so everybody can talk, that wants to stay on the line can talk to everybody else. We'll do that, and just after this next caller, we have another person in the queue to make a comment or ask a question, then Dan will comment, and we'll close up the official part, and we'll open it up for everybody to talk. But before we did that, Nikki, Nikki Nelson, who's co-hosting with me, I'm Jim Condit Jr., for those who joined the call, you have it set up and your team on the Network America. So Tristan had talked about that we can read what Dan did and therefore not have to rediscover a wheel, but you have it on Network America so people can post a document. Tell us about that so we can all share our experiences either in what battles we were in or what we learned, so that everyone doesn't have to rediscover a wheel and rediscover the wheel. Tell everybody how that works on networkamerica.org/network.
Yes, absolutely. When you go into any group, the national group, the state groups, or the county groups, or the party groups, on the left-hand side you'll see a place that says Documents. So if you click there, you can upload a PDF, a Word document, or an Excel document now. And also, I wanted to warn everybody that we're having difficulty with our topics. So when you make a topic or you change a picture, sometimes the content disappears. So sorry about that. We're trying to fix that. And we're also upgrading the system over the next 2 or 3 days. So in the comments now, you'll be able to upload a picture, and you'll also be able to edit your comments. So instead of doing a topic, you can do a blog, because the blogs are fine until we fix the topics, but you can always upload documents. So just go into your group, and that's what we're asking leaders to do as well. When they find information on their election process or the precinct maps or whatever, if they could upload those to their groups for the rest of the members, that would be great.
So, and that's a glitch, but the Network America system is so great because right now we could go from between 100 and 200 members to literally, I don't know if it crashed the system for a while, but in the next few months we could literally go to 300,000-400,000 members, what we need to really get on the playing field to try to reclaim the country for the Constitution. And, it's there. So again, it's like the freedom we have to travel or to put money in the bank or take money out of the bank or to seek a different job somewhere. All that freedoms we have, now we have the freedom to act. It's there. The technology is there for everybody to come in, start talking to each other, and go for the gusto, go for the county chairmanships and so forth in the Democrat and Republican Party. So it's there, and also to post the documents. It's in Network America, where you can post the history of what happens to your group in your county and all that type of stuff. And before we go to the next caller, Tristan, I'm going to let you go and go to the next caller. Thanks, and stay in touch, and we'll be in touch. But before I could do that, I wanted to say one story about Glenn Beck. He used to have a national television show. I believe it was on CNN originally, then he went to Fox, but this was the CNN portion. And the Florida coordinator was named Stephanie Scruggs. I talked to her once. I probably should try to get back in touch with her because she was a dynamo, and she organized a lot of these things where they went to D.C. and they were wasting millions of dollars going to D.C. but thought they were going to pressure their congressman. But she just didn't see it, but she got all the people who were on there. So she's a lady who was on our calls in 2008, I'm going to say, Pat, and I can't remember her last name. She knew Stephanie Scruggs personally in Florida, and she told her, you've got to look at this video, The Strangest Political Secret, which was the video that I made for the how to run for, why you should run for precinct and that. And so Stephanie Scruggs put that out to everybody in her state and all 50 state leaders of the 912 group, saying, watch this video and run for precinct. The minute she did that, I knew we were going to be in for all kinds of backlash, and we were, and I'll go into that another call, including a phony group that popped up that was promoted by the New York Times that Glenn Beck promoted. He promoted the phony group within a few days of when they popped up out of nowhere. And also, but this is what happened when Stephanie Scruggs, who was a dynamo, head of Florida 912, was on the Glenn Beck show on CNN. And this is only about 60 seconds more, but listen to what happened. She said there was 3 gals, I think, or maybe a guy and 2 gals on the panel with Glenn Beck, and she said, have encouraged all of our people, national TV now, we've encouraged all of our people to run for precinct, because by running for precinct, we can take over the county leaders and take over the state parties of the Republican Party. Stephanie Scruggs said it on national TV. Finally, somebody said it. Glenn Beck looks at her like she had spoken Swahili and Latin divided by Greek. He looked at her as if he didn't understand what she said, and he kind of had this slightly stressed, slightly pleasant look on his face. Said nothing. Then the other lady said, we got a county official in whatchamacallit county in Florida indicted because he was corrupt, and we got him indicted for corruption, and he's been removed from office. Now Glenn Beck said, wow! I'm taking my phone. He was like, wow, that's fantastic. That's why we have these 9/12 groups. He was totally animated, totally bad. Now, I wonder to this day, did Glenn Beck just not understand what Stephanie Scruggs was saying, or did he know what she was saying, and he knew that if he encouraged her, he was going to incur the wrath of all the power structure that he's connected with in Washington?
Oh, we've got to get that clip, Jim.
They took it down. I didn't know how to bring. Now maybe we can still figure out how to get it. Maybe Stephanie has the whole show somewhere. But I'm telling you, within a few days of that happening, that clip went down. And they usually don't. They usually leave those up because it promotes the show. But you see what I'm saying? If Glenn Beck would have jumped out of his chair and said, Stephanie Scruggs has just said what every person in the country should do, and especially the Republican Party conservatives should do. If he had done that, that would have been maybe a game changer. But he acted like he couldn't understand what she said. But the other thing, now I'm all for moving corrupt politicians. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy that in that one county they nailed the guy and he got removed from office. But that doesn't point us in the direction of saving the country. So I just wanted to share that story because Dan talked about Glenn Beck. Let's go to the next person in the queue.
There's an article on it, Jim. I'm going to post it.
You already found an article on that subject?
It says part of the deal, Beck not allowed to emphasize precinct solution.
Well, who wrote that?
And then it talks about 2 statements, 2 very different reactions. At about 6.37, Stephanie Scruggs mentions Pat Wayman of Venice, Florida.
That was her. That was Pat Wayman, yeah.
That has taught people over Florida how to run for precinct in order to take back the Republican Democratic parties. Right after mentioning the precinct strategy at Pat, Stephanie mentioned that in another county, some of the 9/12 people fought corruption, and then it goes on and on. So I'm going to post this right now, guys.
But who wrote that, and where did you find it?
Oh, my gosh, it's Jim Condit Jr.
Yeah, that sounds like my e-wire.
That's an article, Jim. That's hilarious. It's on another website, though, American Constitutional Government Reform. Okay, that's so funny. All right, I'll go
no, it sounded like all I could do was write about it because they took the clip down. There are 4 or 5 people in the country that sometimes copy my e-wires. Okay, we got the next caller is in the queue. This looks like might be Nick from Texas. Go ahead. Hello? Okay, Nick, you're not coming through for some reason, if it's you.
That's because you didn't unmute me.
Oh, well, I did in my, you were supposed to be automatically unmuted. Go ahead and talk now. Let's make sure we can hear you. Okay, wait a minute. My board is malfunctioning. Try it again. Nick, try it again.
Okay, now it says unmuted.
Yeah, on my board it says mute. It says I've muted you, so something's going wrong with my board here. But go ahead. Go ahead now that we can hear you.
I don't know how long this my phone's going to last. Is David Callahan on the call?
I don't think so. He was on a few weeks ago, and we may have him on, as a guest to talk on the.
He's apparently very close to Stuart Rhodes, so he may be the guy to tell Stuart Rhodes to get off his ass. And
I don't see Dave Callahan on the call.
Make Network America and Project Freedom USA friends.
Right, exactly. And the same would go for Campaign for Liberty and the Tea Parties and everything else.
Well, and Sheriff Mack and his constitutional sheriffs and police association.
Exactly, and all these groups, if they started to hear from their grassroots, they may do something. Although, I do worry a little bit. I do worry when I hear, like Dan didn't tell the story tonight, but he cornered Ann Coulter, who I like in many ways and don't like in some other ways. But Ann Coulter is always one of my favorite guests to watch because she stirs things up. And he cornered her on why she didn't mention Precinct in her latest book, Adios America. But they all seem to not do it. And locally, I think I told you when we tried to take over the Republican Party here in 1990 in Cincinnati, which is a lifetime ago, 25 years ago, but all of the big conservative groups would not openly stand with us. We got 700 people to run. The party establishment got 900 people to run out of 1,100 precincts. But none of the big conservative or libertarian groups would stand with us because I think they were afraid that if we lost, they would not get their little pat on the head from Republican headquarters. So we had to fight.
In my opinion, it's the Republican headquarters have told them that is the line they cannot cross.
Exactly.
And it's going to become the militia. It's
the
next line that cannot be crossed.
Yeah, well, that'd be equal up there with it, I'm sure. But now that you mentioned that, Nick, let me share this. We had or as Rush says, don't share it, just tell us, which I agree with that. But let me tell you what happened. We had the head of one of the organizations, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's a good guy, and he's made some very humble public confessions of things he had had problems in his life in the past, and he fixed them. And he's a very humble guy to anybody that airs their sins in public to try to help others. Their past sins. I have to have respect for him. But he told me, and he was the head of one of the biggest groups here. Okay. I think they had 20,000 local members in the Cincinnati area. And he told me that a guy by the name of the head of Cintas, Dick Farmer, when the elder President Bush came to Cincinnati as president in 1989, two people went to dinner with him at the Masonette, which was our only five-star restaurant. I think it might have been the only five-star restaurant in the country. President Bush, Dick Farmer, and Carl Lindner. Okay, some of you may have heard of. He's real big, and he died now, but he was real big in Cincinnati. And Dick Farmer, for heaven's sakes, went to the same high school I did, St. Xavier High School. But he had got up in the uppity mucks and whatever. This guy, who I'm not going to mention, who was head of one of the groups because I like him, but he told me, and at least he was honest enough to tell me this, that Dick Farmer was in Cleveland, landed. He was headquartered in Cincinnati, but he was in Cleveland, landed with his private jet. He got a call from him a few nights before the county convention where you elect the party leader, and he said, if you support the platform Republicans, that's what we were called. We called them the establishment Republicans or the patron, and we were the platform because the Reagan platform actually was pretty good if you go back and look at it. So we were the platform, the Republican platform, Republicans standing on principle. He said, if you support the platform Republicans, Dick Farmer said from his private jet in Cleveland, because he was a tens of millions of dollars, if not a billionaire, I will pull all funding from your group. That's what he told the head of one of these big conservative groups. And this guy you got to give him credit to be honest enough to tell me this, and I guess he trusted me at the time. I wasn't going to blow his cover. But he said, we can't support you because we get all our funding pulled. So what you said, Nick, is 1,000% on the mark in many of these cases. People are tied in with people. They may even agree with us, but they're tied in. They don't want to rock the boat and not be invited to the parties and maybe not be cut in on the business deals. But yeah,
there's no conspiracy, Jim.
No, well, there's an open conspiracy, and I believe there's some closed conspiracies too. But a lot of this is in the open conspiracy. But I mean, it's in the open, and if you scratch a little, somebody will tell you what's going on. So. Okay, Dan, did you want to close up with any comments? No one else is in the queue, and we've gone long enough, I think, but let's give Dan, who's our guest tonight, thank you, Nick, give Dan the chance to close up, and if Nikki Nelson wants to say anything to close, and then we'll close. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. All I would say in response to that story is there's no substitute for numbers in politics.
Right.
Politics is a numbers game. And if you want to win whatever election it is, it's who shows up to cast votes. And David Schweikert used to be my congressman. and he's not anymore. I'm now represented by a communist named Kirsten Sinema because of the change in the district boundaries. And David has been a precinct committeeman since 18. He's a good guy. He's pro-life. His wife is terrific. But, for example, he voted for Boehner for the speakership. And I raked him over the coals and his wife about it. And he has some convoluted rationale for having done so, like, well, there's nobody else to vote for or something. But the bottom line here is this. 2 or 4 years prior, when he was running against Ben Quayle because of redistricting in the primary, I asked both of them at a forum, hey, supposedly there's a group of conservatives in the House of Representatives who are sort of creating a conservative caucus. Are you members of that? And both of them said, gee, we haven't heard of that. Okay, so let's get this straight here. I knew about it. David was already in Congress. Ben Quayle is the son of Dan Quayle, and neither of them said they had even heard about this, which to me seemed extremely strange at the time. And the only reason I mention that is this is the problem, is that even in the House of Representatives, the conservatives aren't organized enough to make sure that when they vote, they're voting as a conservative bloc. And the fundamental problem of politics overall is that, at least for people who are conservative/libertarian who want to enforce the Constitution and see it enforced, is that it all goes back to that precinct level. In my precinct, the only reason most of the precinct committeemen are hardcore committed conservatives is because I went out and I found, after I became a precinct committeeman, other hardcore committed conservatives who wanted to, quote, do something. And literally, I mean, in a couple of cases, it took me 9 months to convince these guys. And in one case, one of them convinced his wife afterwards to become precinct committeeman. 9 months of, weekly meetings with them at lunch, and I would talk about, hey, if you really want it, because what do we end up talking about at lunch? Oh, how bad things are politically. So my question always is, so what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to complain and buy more guns and send around political cartoons, or are we going to change things? And then I gave him my precinct committeeman recruitment flyer, which lays out logically the only way you can change things is to get involved politically in a political party. And that's what we've got to do. Each one of us individually has to, in our own locality, get to the point so that eventually when we ask the question of David Schweikert, hey, are you guys organized and committed in the House of Representatives to change things there? I mean, you hold the purse strings. They'll say to us, yeah, you know what, we are. You know why? Because I get information from you and your group in my congressional district, and these other guys and gals who are conservative in other congressional districts are getting constantly communicated with from the grassroots that are telling them, if you don't follow the Constitution, we're not going to support you in the next election. We're going to find a better conservative. And that's how it works, and that's what we have to do. And that's why I came on this call tonight, because Jim and Nikki and everybody else associated with Network America get this. It's about participation, and we got to participate. Thanks.
Right. Okay, Dan, well, thank you very much for being the guest tonight. And Nikki, did you have anything you wanted to say before we open it up for general discussion?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know if anybody on the call was interested in becoming a leader in their state or county. And I had explained earlier, it's just basically welcoming people into the system and showing
them how to use the system.
Yeah,
showing them how to use this.
On how most people that know how to use Facebook know how to use it, Jim.
Okay.
Even though I'm still teaching you how to use
right.
Facebook.
Right.
But most people use Facebook. But yeah, if they have any questions on that, and also find the information from your state group, click on that link that goes to the Secretary of State's office and the election and county recorder office, and grab information of the precinct maps for your county and state and upload them into the documents of your group to help people. And basically that's it, right, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot of money. We're not asking for any money or to travel or anything. It's just a matter of people, if they come in and say, gee, who can I contact to talk about this for a minute, or, make sure I'm in the right place, then they got a state leader and a county leader to contact, and they can also contact anybody in the system the way that Network America is set up. They could contact anybody as well as their leaders.
Well, absolutely, and hopefully they'll bring people into their county or state group that they're a leader of.
Right.
So we can grow the groups this way, but we need more leaders. So if anybody's interested, please tell me, and then we'll review the information and make you a leader or an administrator if it's appropriate in that county or state.
Yeah, and for instance, you'll notice I'm not a state leader, for instance. So I was explaining to one of my friends a little earlier, some people are so associated with an issue or with a point of view. So, for instance, someone that is going to be one of our state leaders has to at least be accepting if a person wants to run in the Libertarian Party or the Democrat or Republican, or if they say, I just want to be an educator in my precinct. We have to the state leader is kind of a referee to help them get where they are. But if the state leader is too focused on one issue, or everybody knows, for instance, that a state leader is against people running in the Democrat and Republican Party or something, or somebody is against somebody running in the Constitutional Libertarian Party, they wouldn't really be the best state leader, because they should really focus on what their passion is. The state leaders, excuse me, let me just silence the telephone here. The state leaders have to be a little more not as totally associated with issues, I think. At least that's how we've been working it so far. But that isn't to say the people that are passionate about something aren't very valuable. But anyway, so if you are interested in becoming a state or county leader, please let it be known on the wall. Okay, on that happy note, and that's a good point, let me see if I can get us into general discussion. Yay, Q&A session is over.